So I love, first of all, I love that you all are digging into the book of Revelation. I mean, significantly so. I think you have a great Bible teacher leading you through with Jen Wilkins. I think it's excellent. In a lot of ways, I can just put out here, I have not done as in-depth a study as you will have done by the time that you finish this. And so I might be coming to you to get a little video of you talking, telling me about certain parts about Revelation. But I think just a few general principles. This might just be echoing some of the things she's already said. But when we study end times, when we study eschatology, when we study specifically the book of Revelation, to keep in mind it had a very specific purpose in its time. The people of God, the church, was under vicious persecution under Rome, and John's revelation was God gave him that revelation first and foremost to really be an encouragement that they, this thing they're giving their lives for, that they're joining themselves to, wasn't just going to be put out. As bad as it got, it was going to endure, and Christ, whom they were giving their lives for, was ultimately victorious. And so we don't want to lose sight of that. And anytime, I think just kind of what Linda was saying, anytime we lose sight of the hope that it's supposed to instill in us, then we're probably getting our wires crossed on how we're doing this, because we're losing sight of the initial purpose, because it was for that generation to do it, and every generation since, the church has found great encouragement through whatever tough times, because the reality is there are many tribulations, right, that the church has gone through, that we would say right now the church in northern India is going through, that the church in China is going through, and Iran and stuff, and we have our own types of things. But to look to Revelation is to find that security and hope. Now, the church itself, South Shores Church, let's talk about, we do not, if you look at our statement of faith, we do not have a specific view that we've put into writing on Revelation, on the millennium, or even on the rapture. We're going to kind of categorize that into an area of, this is not a primary area of agreement that we have to have in order to, one, be Christians, or two, even to be members of this church, that we can have healthy room for disagreement because it's just less clear. I think there's really good arguments for these different perspectives. We're probably going to end up individually thinking and leaning towards one that just makes more sense to us and stuff, and that's great. That's really fine. But hold it a little loosely. Even the idea of the rapture, which some of you are finding, this isn't actually directly talked about in Revelation, and that's an interesting thing to hear, because we just assume it is. That's more coming out of, I believe, 1 Thessalonians. But that's in the history of the church and its interpretation of these end times passages, whether from Revelation or Jesus's words or Paul's writings or Daniel, that idea of a rapture that is separate from the full and complete second coming of Christ is historically a newer idea. It's only been around for about 200 years, this sort of pre-tribulational rapturing of the church. Now, I grew up in a time where the Left Behind books were at the peak of popularity, and in my household we couldn't wait till the next one came, and Nikolai, and some of and the Apache helicopters that are the locusts, and it's just like, oh wow, this detail, this image is exactly fulfilled in a literal way. And it was like just enough different. It's like, it's not literal locust, but it's a helicopter that looks like a locust and devour. And it just totally got us all excited all about that. I say, try to separate yourself from that and say, okay, maybe that's one of possibilities. And then the second thing would be, what are the interpretations or understandings that, again, are helpful and, again, balanced with even Jesus' own words about we won't actually know the day or time. What helps keep encouraging us to follow Christ faithfully? Study it, absolutely. Have an opinion on it. That's great. Share those opinions with others. Let's not be divisive over that. Let's be able to appreciate each other in it. If you know that you tend towards like, well, if someone disagrees with me, it just rattles me. Maybe that's not the thing you should be talking about with them, and you should find something else to talk about. Because then there are really awesome things that we should fiercely stick to. The visible, soon, total return of Christ, we're fully vanquished. The second coming of Christ is something we're not going to hold loosely. We're going to hold tightly to that. And the end of evil, the setting up of his heaven on earth and the new creation and all that, we want to hold to that with our lives, because that's what he has promised us since his resurrection, that all church has looked forward to. Those are some thoughts I gave him.
Any questions like these? Derick's willing to.
Thank you, Derick.
Derick, maybe can you just highlight,
Kim.
just because I think, just for clarity, what would you say are the, like the different views of the rapture? Like just summarize real quick the three different.
Okay.
Just so people know what.
Yeah, and actually, if you did grab one of these, it doesn't have a specific thing on the rapture, but on page 65, it's one of the final. You guys okay with QR codes and stuff and going to articles? Okay, so there's a QR code. It's on 3 views of the millennium.
Okay.
Because if we're going to talk about the rapture, we have to first really talk about the views of the millennium, and those do come out of Revelation. It's it's chapter 20, when it talks about Christ, the Satan being bound and Christ reigning for 1,000 years. One, how do we understand that 1,000? Is it a literal, specific area of time? Is it a way of talking about a large period of time that maybe we don't have a specific number to, or what? But so in starting there are these 3 views on it. One being that everything else in Revelation is leading up to that, and so that's pre-millennial. That Jesus returns and he sets up a 1,000-year reign on earth, that then afterwards it's the final defeat of Satan and such. So that within premillennial, then that's where the rapture view of pre-tribulational rapture of the church comes into play. And so really that's that's the, I'll use terms, I don't know if they hold on to it, but a dispensational view that views all of church history in a particular way, different dispensations of time, where they would say we're in the church dispensation right now, and the Jewish people have a very separate identity, and Israel has a separate identity, and so what they're seeing in that is a particular view on the future, what happens with Israel and stuff. And that's going to tend to be more trying to do the more literal 1-for-1 ratios from some of these things, not as symbolic of an interpretation, very future leaning. And so the pre-tribulational rapture of the church, they go to Daniel 9 and the 70 weeks, and there's this final week, and they separate it out from the rest and say we're waiting for that final 70th week to happen, and it'll start with the rapture of the church, and then the 7 year of tribulation, and halfway through other things happen and stuff like that. So that's premillennial. It's before, when Christ comes, he inaugurates that. Amillennial, so A, then millennial, stands for not millennial, but it doesn't mean they don't believe there's a reign of Christ, just that, not that it's a literal 1,000 years. And instead, people of that group would look to say, when Christ defeated death and resurrection, that's actually when the binding of Satan occurred. So Satan has been, and the rulers and authorities have been disarmed in a way that's qualitatively different from before Christ. When, in Daniel, the angel Gabriel struggles to get to Daniel because the prince of Persia is able to keep him from it. These spiritual authorities had greater authority and rule to prevent God's people from doing things. Well, Christ's death and resurrection, he binds Satan. There's still Satan's effects and influences and demons that work in the world, but it's been changed in the guise. So now we have Jesus Christ, Matthew 28, all authority has been given to me on earth and heaven. Go into all the nations. Nothing's held back from you for my gospel to spread and stuff. And so they actually say we are in the millennial reign of Christ. Christ is at the right hand of the Father. He is reigning through his church, and the powers will, essentially be defeated by. They have power over it. And so they don't have a rapture as a distinct time from the second coming. Rather, the rapture is at the second coming of Christ. So when it talks about 1 Thessalonians caught up into the air, that is congruent with the full return of Christ. Post-millennial would be the third one that's talked about, and similar to amillennial in that they do not take the millennial as a literal 1,000 years, but rather the difference between it and amillennial. So they'd say we're in the that Jesus returns after the millennial, and it's right now, but they have a very specific view that the world will get progressively better. And it's the idea that the church will start to overturn culture and ruling and stuff like that. More of a progressive, that Jesus reigning through the church, amillennial would say, but the church is still going through tribulations and good times and bad times and stuff. Post-millennials, they expect to see the church's influence increasing, and society actually improving. Still non-believers around, but overall it becomes
The
like a
culture.
Christian world in a sense.
I like that one better.
So, and that article in the back will delineate those, and they don't really take a position. They try to lay out all three for you. But the church, our church itself doesn't have a specific position. I think within even our teaching team of pastors, you'll find some variation within that. And so what we try to do before teaching on these different things is, okay, what's the main thing? Where is the crucial parts of agreement we want to make sure we don't miss out on? That help, Kim?
That's good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Helpful. Okay.
So more the focus is the millennial reign versus the rapture, because do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So
That's
yeah,
the key.
the everyone go, yes, the rapture will happen, but where and how it's placed
Right.
is
Based
different.
on the-
And even there's premillennial, historic premillennialism still didn't change the location of the rapture from the second coming. They saw it as connected still. So again, only in the last 200 years, the whole kind of dispensational,
Which would say there was a rapture and then there's the
And then-
second coming.
and then the second coming, yeah.
Like two.
Yeah, the idea that Jesus returns, but he doesn't touch the ground. He comes, gets his church, and leaves without ever coming down. And so that's how they distinct it. So it's like, because they don't want to say there's a third coming. They
Right.
want to say the rapture is its own thing in the air, and then this second coming is when he fully comes and then starts that
So when do
1,000-year reign.
Well, in that view.
We need to be ready at any time.
Anytime.
Soon.
Soon and very soon.
Soon.
Yeah.
Very soon.
And
How long, Lord?
yeah. And so there is a wrestling of how long, Lord, and we look at the end of Revelation, and we should make our prayer, come soon, Lord Jesus. Our hearts yearn for the full restoration, the end of evil, ourselves being what we're supposed to be, being with the Lord, while also knowing that he says, you know, his patience and delaying judgment is a kindness that should lead people to repentance.
Yes.
And we're to take advantage of that time in the waiting.